brother.
All right. Salud.
So, yeah, Slanjava.
Yeah. So,
Beskarma Kemenahash, if I'm bringing back Scotch Gaelic. Means good evening. How are you?
right back at you.
It's the answer would be Hamigleva. It means I'm doing well.
Yeah, what you say. Absolutely. I got
Oh,
Ola and Cerveza. That's about and Banos. That's about all I got when it comes
yeah,
to something other than English. So
I was like my class. You graduated 87?
86.
86, which is crazy because you're only a few months older than me.
Well, I got held back.
No, I think I got out because I graduated 88. But yeah, there was I was one of the last years that did not have to take any foreign languages. I had zero desire to learn anything but English.
Yeah, I did Spanish. We had to do it, I think 2 years. I think I did it 3, and then that was it.
But it didn't take, huh?
No, it didn't take it all. I mean, it was back in the days of rote memorization and different times. No interactive type stuff. Conjugate these 14 verbs for today's test.
That's so freaking stupid.
It is. It really is. So I've tried the Babbel thing and a couple times, and it's just time and priorities.
Yeah. I've got other things to do. Freddie Mercury, our old pal Will Parker's on. Ted Leonard is on. Says, good evening. He's coin number 1461. What's that coin number thing going on
number?
there?
I don't have a coin with me. I'm on the road. I'm an undisclosed bunker location east of the Rockies. That gives you access to the training vault, guys. You got everything from BJJ white belt to blue belt. Most importantly, really, I should have started with the assessment. Take the assessment, find out where you're at. Do you need to work on your medical? You probably do, because we can all work on our medical, because that applies to so many things other than self-defense. That can be, something that happens on the road somewhere, right? Something that happens at home. You're working, God forbid, you're working with a chainsaw, things go wrong. I always make sure to I do a lot of chainsaw work at home. I always have a medical bag on the tractor with me there. You've got BJJ white belt to blue belt. You've got pistol. You've got rifle. You got shotgun. You got pistol caliber carbine. Got ground grappling. What am I missing? I know I'm missing stuff.
Well, I think you did a fantastic job. Preparedness, go bag building, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So take a test drive, man. Find out if it's right for you. It doesn't cost you anything. At the end of the 2 weeks, shoot me an email. So Rich, not from me, brother. Appreciate your time and for looking at us. But tonight we're going to dig into some geopolitics. It's kind of going to be my lane, and then Will's going to take us through tariffs. And I'll go ahead and preface this by saying that I took this from Control Risks Group Holdings. It's a London-based company, and they kind of outlined their top 5 concerns for 2025. I thought it was a pretty solid list, so I'm going to go ahead and give them credit for it, and we'll dig into some of their graphs. One of them is going to be the coming global trade war. Number 3, I'm going to skim that just to give this, because this is where Will is really going to shine this evening, I think. So what does Freddie Merck say?
It says, I may want to consider getting a permanent coin with number emblazoned on my body forever. You mentioned that. I've been considering getting sleeves, and one of the things is the whole warrior side of things, and that is on the list for that. Yep, that right there. So I'm going to do the I in red because I think that looks cool. And so I've been trying to figure out what to do there. So odd that you mentioned that. And if my bride is watching, that is the first she's hearing of this refreshed idea for this. So there you go, sweetie.
Yeah, Will Parker has a big, beautiful American Warrior Society tattoo. I'm envious of it. I need to get one. Let's talk about the first one. So we're going to talk about uncertain states of America, red line geopolitics, global trade war, rising political violence, and digital concentration risk, which is pretty interesting here.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what that one is.
Yeah, so the from a British perspective, this is their perspective, but I think they're right to say America's got a lot of uncertainty going into 2025. Mm-hmm. I think we'd all agree with that, whether you're on the right or the left. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen, man. Yeah. And for the rest of the world, like they say, well, if America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. So, I think that's true. Yes. If you look at, and from their perspective, it's like, hey, man, look at America's spending long term when it comes to spending on national defense.
Mhm.
And it's pretty interesting to see that trend going down. Of course, the Biden administration, you see a slight uptick. And then we look at the U.S. support for active participation in world affairs. I love this one. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure how the Chicago Council on Global Affairs put this data together, Will, but look at what it shows, man. Look at
Yeah.
the trend, the red line for Republicans.
Yeah, that is interesting. I'm just kind of digesting this here. The Democrats have gone down
Hawkish.
since 2019.
Well, look
Yeah.
at them. The blue line, it just explodes upward. I guess, what
Yeah.
is that, around the Obama administration?
Yeah, the Obama years, 9 to, well, really, it was even going up into 2019, which I find surprising, but I guess they kind of went along, but the Republicans were going down. So I guess this is um, not necessarily the politicians, maybe the parties and the surveying of people, regular people, I guess.
Mhm.
And Obama, boy, I'm as big a critic of Obama as you can find out there for most everything, but the guy was a savage looking back on it. I mean, he dropped more bombs and more drone attacks than Bush could have ever dreamed of. And he was a he was a war criminal, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it's interesting again. And Obama's coming out of Chicago. This is the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. I don't know
yeah.
what leanings they have, or kind of how they come up with this data, but it plays into my bias that the left is getting more hawkish, and the Republicans, the right, is getting more isolationist.
And I will admit, I'm falling into that personally. I'm tired of spending all of our money overseas on this stuff, and then taking 20 years to get Afghanistan back to the Taliban after we wasted all that time, treasure, and blood for nothing. Why continue doing this?
I'm with you, brother. I'm totally with you. Yeah. I consider myself more of a Ron Paul libertarian, and I having stomped around the world on behalf of Uncle Sam most of my adult life and stuff like that. And I don't have a problem saying, we went to war for oil, or we went to war for this resource or that. I mean, let's call it what it is. Don't say you're bringing freedom.
Yeah.
The funny meme, Will, I'm sure you've seen, it's like they just discovered a $5 trillion worth of oil under the outback of Australia. And the meme had this eagle, and it says, Australian freedom is coming,
I know, I haven't seen that one. There was an old saying the Brits used to use, the biggest problem with the Middle East is our oil is under their land.
Yeah, that's all right. I love that. So this one right here is kind of the red line stuff.
Okay.
And we're going to look at it from the Middle East, Europe, Asia. And then we'll get into later what has recently transpired with our current administration, which is just absolutely unbelievable. We'll get to that later. But the collapse of red lines is driving an escalating conflict between Israel and Iran. And of course, it's regional proxies with Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, all this stuff. It's and I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not going. If that's one thing that Trump has said, I'm gonna negotiate a settlement between Ukraine and Russia, but he's not saying too much about Israel, has he? Like, Israel needs to give him a break. No, I think this is the time. Keep pushing till you get an unconditional surrender from these people.
Yeah, that's the only thing that group of people understand is brute force. And if you come back, we're going to give it to you twice as hard.
Yeah, amen. So, of course, the war in Ukraine trampled all over many supposed red lines over the last 3 years. Invasion and occupation, weapons transfers, of course, from us to them and other Western countries, aerospace violations, war crimes, long-range strikes, and, of course, we'll come back to the long-range strikes here in just a moment. But before I go any further, please like and hit that share button. We got a fantastic show for you. It's a little unorthodox, but Will has been flying a lot lately, and we got to work around his schedule if we're going to get access to that big 10-pound brain of his. But, Asia, long dormant flashpoints, man, when it comes to all the stuff from the Cold War, Korea, not so much Vietnam, but, China, Taiwan, all these things are just heating up when it comes to Cold War II and military exercise in the Taiwan Straits. border provocations by the Koreans, non-lethal maritime clashes in the South China Sea between China and Philippines and even Australia in some instances are getting more frequent and ever closer to those invisible red lines. And what role is the coming tariff war that Will's going to talk about going to play into that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. On the Asian side of this, we're even seeing lines get drawn. With the Philippines, a lot of fisheries, or the Chinese are going into a lot of fisheries and overfishing those, and the Filipino Coast Guard is trying to fight back on that. We're even seeing it some with Vietnam on the trade side. China is really starting to trying to exert a lot of influence there to separate us from Vietnam as a trade partner. And as you were talking about that, the Korea thing, we know North Korea has sent soldiers to Russia to fight against Ukraine. Well, what happens when one of these long-range missiles that Biden just authorized to be fired into Russia, that I know you're going to talk about here soon, what happens if that kills some North Koreans?
I agree, man.
Is that another front? What if some Chinese soldiers or advisors, get killed or injured there? It's quite a mess.
Yeah, it is. And so far, the North Koreans are getting their asses handed to them, but that's to be expected from as green as they are. They haven't been in war like America has forever. And, give them a couple of years. And by the time you're going to have an NCO crop and junior officer corps that are very accustomed to a brutal war that's going on over there. Yeah. So, and that may be what the Kim dynasty is hoping for. Get them a little bloodied, get them some experience. We're going to need them later. What do you think?
Well, we can take that back to the Germans prior to World War II when they was it the Spanish Civil War? There was a war in Spain. I forget the name of it now, guys. My history is failing me, but Germany spent a lot of troops there, and basically with the philosophy of whoever comes back is going to be pretty decent, and that helped form the backbone of the German army leading into World War I or II. I really can't remember now. Sorry. It's way back in the memory bank. But this is not, it's kind of a proxy training ground, right? Their own land isn't at risk. And then you send a bunch of people over there, and then what they learn, they'll bring back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that, and that's happened throughout history. And the old Korea vets, the few that were still around in Vietnam, had a lot of value. Now, when it comes to my generation, and when I went to war in the desert, the Vietnam guys were, the few that were in my battalion, were not prepared for this. They were like, where's the damn jungle at? Where's the beer?
Yeah.
We're used to a whorehouse in the Vale that they could visit every night. Like, no, man, not here. We're just stuck in the desert.
Yeah. And nobody knows what tubuku means either.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Will Rhodes is on. Scott is on. Our good friend, Mr. Don Bothwell, is on. Scott is up there in Michigan. He's coin number 2489. Tony says, hey, all. I didn't get the time change memo. Sorry about that, brother.
Yeah, looking around my schedule, Tony. Sorry. It's on me.
As far as the trade war goes, this is the third concern that this global risk analysis company has. And this is their global risk, not so much for political actors, but more for business. And I chose them specifically for that role because that is the lens by which I think Will's going to look at this as an investor, as an American, et cetera. So this is going to be a new, more intense phase of global trade war. It's going to be a top risk for business in 2025. Trump did some things in his first term. Now he said, the most beautiful word to him in the English language is tariffs. And he's going to use the hell out of it. And I'm excited for it if done correctly. But even the little things, and that is the supply chain disruption that you'll see that I've underlined down there. It's going to be a problem. It could become a national security problem if some of these supply chain issues that we're not even aware of become vulnerable, whether that's pharmaceuticals or whatever. But I want to focus in on this third bullet point here. So while global trade is forecast to grow in 2025, globalization, remains under threat. And I say, so what? I piss on globalization. It's been a failure in a whole lot of ways. As geopolitical competition drives the fragmentation of financial systems. And I put a question mark there, Will, because I wanted to get your thoughts on what do you think they mean when they say geopolitical competition drives fragmentation of the financial systems?
Okay, so let's just go back to the globalization part, and then we'll talk about the competition, because the competition is coming from the fragmentation of globalization. So globalization is really built around a strong U.S. military, specifically a strong U.S. Navy, to guarantee free shipping lanes.
Mm.
That's a big part of it. And that's becoming increasingly difficult with China building up their Navy. Now, their Navy is nothing compared to ours. I'm not saying that, but they don't have, it's kind of like the BRICS threat to the dollar. They don't have to totally overtake the dollar to show the weaknesses, right?
Right.
So, as one of the reasons over all these years that we've printed all this money, that we never saw a lot of inflation, was globalization. So we all benefited from globalization, whether we like it or not. Okay.
True.
All those years that we had, they printed tons of money that you, me, and everybody else could go out and spend. That excess money all went overseas, basically to China, right? So we exported our inflation, and we can prove that with the hindsight of 2020, because when those supply chains broke down, we saw inflation go up when those dollars were trapped here inside the United States, right? So here's where, to your question, as geopolitical competition drives the fragmentation of financial systems. So now, as globalization is starting to come apart, now it's harder for us to export our dollars somewhere else. If suddenly there's tariffs with China, or there's a trade war out there with I'll say India, even though there's nothing on the board for that right now. Well, when those start to break down, well, now we have to produce those things here, and that is structurally inflationary, because U.S. workers will not work for what those overseas workers will work for. And then that drives other problems. So this is going to be a big unwinding, and it's going to change a lot of the assumptions that we as Americans and our economy operate under, because we're used to really low inflation since about what, 1991, mid 80s.
I'll give it that.
Really going down since 1982, but really, for years the Fed struggled to get inflation up to 2%. I don't think we're going to see 2% again for a decade.
Thanks. I want to hurt myself now.
Yeah, well, but that also goes back to, you and I don't see Razmik on here. You guys have this yellow stuff you really like.
Well, and it's doing well.
That plays into that, right? Because a weakening dollar from inflation drives gold prices up, also silver, all commodities actually, which brings the threat of stagflation. So this fragmentation, we're undoing the system. There's a lot of pain when we brought the system in, which we're going to talk about a little bit when we get to tariffs. But there's going to be pain undoing a system that really most of us have lived under the vast majority of our lives, and we make assumptions and we make decisions without even being aware it's a decision. It's just how things are done, right?
Let me ask you this, because when I saw that, I also wanted to ask you, is this has something to do with DeFi, decentralized finance, i.e. crypto? When I see stuff like this, because the crypto's on a tear, man, it's insane right now.
Yes, it is.
Crazy. It's on its way to the moon. And I saw that and I'm like, I need to ask Will if he thinks that has something to do with crypto markets.
It does, because it's becoming another, well, I think it is another alternative asset class. Gold is an alternative asset class. And by alternative,
that's what Ackman said. Yeah.
Was that? Yep. And this is, and Trump, when Trump is either nominated or said he's going to nominate Kathy Wood to be the chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission and take Gary Gensler's spot, she is very pro-crypto, incredibly pro-crypto. She runs the ARK Invest funds, a very pro-technology, pro-AI, very forward-thinking lady, a very, very smart lady too, as far as that goes. So that is a big part of the reason why crypto is on a tear here right now, because they think it's going to become more institutionalized, which to me devalues crypto for why I want crypto. I've got some crypto now because it's on a tear, and I've been buying some. I've really held it really since it was around 18,000, and now it's 92 last I looked. But it's become part of the system now. If you want to go onto the crypto exchange of your choice, You don't just go on there now and put down any name you want. It's the same as going and opening a bank account. It has to be know your borrower. I think it's called, the laws are called. You have to put in name, address, social security number. It's no
Which
longer
to me defeats some of that reason why it was attractive to me.
Yes.
And it becomes like, okay, it's an asset class, but it's never going to be a financial instrument, I think, like it was first touted to be.
Exactly right. Yep. Because and we could see that coming when they started having futures markets on it. When now there's ETFs you can buy with it. It's become part of the system. So I think the next alternative may be the real alternative. What that'll be, I have no clue. But I think the Securities and Exchange Commission, it took them a long time to approve the first Bitcoin ETF. But now that they have their fingers in there, it's an alternative like gold or silver. It's not a true alternative the way you and I might think of an alternative.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I at some point I'm looking for it to become a tulip, and everybody's just going to go, "Oh shit, what have I got here?"
Yep.
And the server farms, we're going to drive by them, one day. Like, look at that, honey. Remember when that was a thing, like the pet rock?
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
Yep.
I want to introduce a couple of folks here.
Yeah,
Will Rhodes is on. He says, just got home from work. This made a crappy day better. Jay Fujimoto out there in Hawaii. Greetings from Hawaii, gents. He's coin number 188. And John Shriver's on Yukon, Oklahoma. John, good to see
you guys.
Let's talk about the rise in political violence.
Yeah.
And of course, this is near and dear to Britain's heart because they have had some significant problems, and it's only going to get worse the more they try to act like it's not happening. Mm-hmm. They broke this down into 4 different areas, and I'm going to kind of hit on them briefly. Geopolitical rivalry will continue to undermine counterterrorism cooperation and stymie solution to regional conflicts. This will sustain permissive operating spaces and safe havens in fragile states as launch pads for regional and global terrorism. Boy, is that true? But it's also, we've seen this to be the case for decades now. These little fragile states that really are, whether that's, the Sudan, Somalia, Afghanistan, Yemen. I mean, you name your shithole, and you're seeing it, right?
Well, yeah, as Germany, how that's working out for them right now.
Yeah, and I go back to Angela Merkel. My God, what a freaking what a mess! And Trump has shown with his picks that you can have strong, capable, competent, highly effective female leaders put into positions of power, and I have full faith and confidence in the women that he's picking to do a fantastic job. Number 2, political polarization will continue to justify and normalize violence against political and social enemies. We've seen that since the summer of love in our generation, and I would say we're going to see more of it as the left digs in its heels. And in some regard, these governors and other left blue areas that are like, we're gonna work to fight the Trump administration. And I saw a quote from Holman, and I wasn't planning on bringing it up, but since we're having this conversation, it's worthy talking about it. He says, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu says she will not cooperate with deportations and will protect the illegals in her city. Border Czar Tom Homan has a message for her, quote, "It is a federal crime to harbor illegal aliens facing deportation. You will comply or you will go to jail." What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, get after it. You or I or a mayor or any elected official says, hey, we're not going to comply with those gun laws. They wouldn't hesitate, right? You're going to prison. See ya. Have a nice life. Right.
Yeah, ask the Branch Davidians how that worked out.
Yeah, exactly.
When they try to give the ATF the middle finger, how'd that work out?
Yeah,
burned to the ground.
And along the lines of the political, this isn't violence, but it's a step towards more of that separation. In Pennsylvania, they just came out and said, "Yeah, we're going to count the illegal votes." Yeah, we know that Pennsylvania Supreme Court said we can't count those. We're going to count them anyway. Mm-hmm. Really? I mean. And then probably the next speech they talk about, we need to be more united as a country. Come on, seriously?
Yeah, Dr. Fuller and I talked about that. We did a little show yesterday morning, and there was one of the, I think it was a county commissioner or somebody, it was a female, and she's like, nobody follows the, what was her absolute quote? It was so mind-numbingly stupid. It's like, nobody follows court precedent anymore. The only way to get the court's attention is to violate the law, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And I'm like, well, then let's put some people in handcuffs. What are we doing?
Yeah, I'm all for it. And I don't care if it's left or right. If somebody on the right says, hey, we're just going to go and count a bunch of these illegal votes, no, same rules. No. If it would have been Harris that would have won and somebody on the right was pulling that, I'd be like, nope, the system is sacrosanct. It has to be. Otherwise, if we lose faith in a free and fair election, which we can talk about that, but if we lose faith in that as a country, well, then we're in really bad shape.
Yeah, I agree. And to back to Don's point here, says once the SEC gets involved in issues, regulations about the quote know your client rule kicks in, there's no anonymity allowed into that. And I get it. And that's why Rich Brown is out of it, because I'm looking for anonymity, not less of it.
Absolutely. And thank you for the know your client thing. I forgot the exact word in there, but that was part of the reason I've got a crypto. The crypto I hold now is in ETFs. I'm trading it. I'm not investing in it as an alternative like I do with gold and silver. Not worth it.
You might as well, right? What's the difference?
Yeah. And to Tony's point, I'm not drinking well, actually it is a wine cooler. I poured out this IPA.
I knew it.
And I put Bartles and James in here. So yeah.
That's
you guys got me, rats.
Bartles and James.
I mean, I did graduate high school in '86 after all, so
Number 3, online radicalization fueled by disinformation, conspiracy theories, and propaganda. Incitement will inspire and motivate unprecedented attacks of individual political violence. Hell, we saw that the left, they really stirred it up, and guess what? They radicalized a few folks to take shots at the incoming president-elect. So, yeah, we've definitely seen that from the left. I'm not saying that the right is completely out of the woods on that, but
no, not at all. I mean, and we've seen one for sure in the Northwest where they were trying to, they did shoot up, and since they did shoot up some substations to try and start the race war, right? And somebody else got caught before they started it. Ohio, I want to say, but I could be wrong on that. So this is happening on both sides, guys. There's wackadoodles on both sides. We all have to be careful to, be careful who we associate with online, because you don't want to get caught up in any of that garbage.
No, and there's a group of, at first I heard Christian nationalists coming to Jackson County, Tennessee, which is about 45 minutes away. I'm like, all right, well, they've weaponized that word Christian nationalist. I don't even take it serious anymore. But when you look at their charter, it's kind of like, but they bought up like 600 acres and they want to create their new place here. But let's go to the tail of the tape here. This Bucks County Commissioner Diane Ellis Marsalega said, quote, I think we all know that precedent by a court doesn't matter anymore in this country. People violate laws anytime they want. So for me, if I violate this law, it's because I want a court to pay attention. There's nothing more important than counting votes. In court, of course, unless they're illegal. Yeah,
I agree completely. It's very important to count votes that are legitimate.
You can't make this stuff up. The last one here. Emerging technologies like low-cost drones and 3D printed firearms will enable physical attacks against a wider range of assets and locations. Encrypted messaging platforms and generative AI will also facilitate nonviolent but disruptive threats. And now this is the thing that you got to go to the source of this thing. We don't need to worry about 3D printed firearms. Our country's awash in them. So that's a nothing burger. Drones are going to be a serious threat. What China is doing with drones, man, is mind numbing. If you haven't watched some of the things that they're doing, you need to get on the YouTubes and check it out. I think the AI piece, we really have to question what we see and hear. And really consider the source you're getting your news. I was telling my brother the other day, years and years ago, maybe as much as 10 years ago, I wrote a really nasty letter to Lamar Alexander when he was a senator here in Tennessee and said, I can't believe you voted this way, blah, blah, blah. And, a few days later, I got a thing back from the staff, like, I don't know what you're talking about. We voted the opposite. So, I'd been misinformed. So I agree with them. We definitely need to consider the source. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. And check and double check and recheck and check it from multiple sides. Let's say you hear your local Democrat votes a certain way you don't like. go check CNN. Go check the actual, better yet, go check the actual register for whether that be a state level representative or a national level representative. Go check the actual voting record and find out. Take that 5 minutes before you waste your own time and breath, and then also go back and don't believe that source that led you astray if that's what actually happened. And that's how those places go out of business, right? If you go, hey, I'm not going to trust XYZ.com anymore because they led me astray on this, they're not getting the clicks. They go out of business. Other places notice that.
And there's a difference between disinformation and misinformation. Misinformation is, Will and I may mess something up tonight. We may misquote something or mischaracterize something. It's unintentional. Mm-hmm. But a lot of these places are intentionally disinforming people. And that's the difference. It's the intent. Misinformation is, hey, man, they did their best. They got it wrong. But when you're trying to disinform anybody, and Will nor I would ever do that here.
Correct.
The final one, Will, is it's the issue with concentrating risk in the technology ecosystems, man. And this is going to be a worsening threat, not just in 2025, but as we continue to go down. The 2024 CrowdStrike downtime resulted in an estimated $5.2 billion loss. And that was just a benign error. It was just no malicious intent. Yep. But we can see where these projections are going up and up and up when it comes to the number of recorded destructive and disruptive cyber attacks. So this is something, man, that is just going to continue to hit us. And when you think about the fragility of our electrical grid, our telecommunications grid, our links with our satellites, any of it is incredibly vulnerable, and it rests atop old infrastructure.
Yes.
So this is only going to continue to be a problem for the foreseeable future. What do you think?
Yep. And I'll throw the pitch right back to the training vault. Oh, do the assessment, get a go bag, get prepared. And like I just told my bride, with this now Biden, authorizing the launch of long-range missiles by Ukraine into Russian territory, you've got Russia, China, North Korea. We know they're in all the SCADA systems. We had the Colonial Pipeline attack. They still don't know who did that. So like I've told her, keep your bag in the car, keep your car in the top 3/4 of the tank. There's no reason to let it go down more than a quarter tank. And yeah, we have gas at home, but there's no reason to roll into the house on an 1/8 of a tank of gas and use that up, right? So all those sorts of things, and just do those little steps, because if that happens, and I think it's really more a matter of when than if, right?
It absolutely is.
And it could be Putin, it could be China, Taiwan, it could be anything else.
Accident.
What's that?
It could be an accident.
Yeah,
the whole thing with AI, artificial intelligence, it's software that writes itself, and it could just run away and I'm going to shut down the power grid to these people because I need it to build my widget.
Right,
I'm going to redirect all of it to this task over here, and that is calculating the value of pi. I mean, who knows?
Yep.
So yeah, it's going to happen. Period.
Yeah. Real quick, can we go back a slide or two? There's something I want to hit on. Go back one more. There you go. You're talking about the threats here. Sean Ryan show. You had Sarah Adams and Boone on, correct? And Sarah Adams, super bad. She talked about Al Qaeda 2.0, which, by the way, her book Al Qaeda 2.0, she was part of that book. Great book. She puts out there, she believes Al Qaeda and their surrogates have about 1,500 fighters here in the U.S. that have come across the southern border or have come in on other types of visas and are here and are just waiting. And Sean Ryan has put forward that he thinks the go time will be right around the time when the southern border gets locked down, because then they know they can't get any more people in. Then they'll go into an active phase. That doesn't mean it'll be the next day, next month, could be 6 months, whatever that takes. But that it all plays in together to those geopolitics. If you really want to be angry, go watch those shows on Sean Ryan's show, because it's you just think you're angry about the Afghanistan withdrawal right now.
Yeah, you'll really be pissed off.
Yeah.
And again, I hope that this next administration comes in and recalls some of these folks to active duty, just so we can hold them accountable for their failures. And holding them accountable is going to probably look like, in a lot of instances, a court martial.
Yeah.
And, long prison sentences. And maybe you retired as a 4-star or 2-star, and we're going to bump you down to lieutenant colonel and hurt you in the pocketbook. Maybe you won't do jail time, but there's a way to get these people.
Yep.
Pull your security clearances, and et cetera.
Yep. I mean, you get, some NCO that does something wrong. He or she's held accountable viciously, right?
Big time. Mm-hmm.
But you get far enough up the food chain, you got the political connections, it just goes away.
Yeah, and you get a book deal and a sexy job on the Beltway and blah blah blah, and it's like no, shouldn't work that way.
That's right.
So you had intimated about this, and let's go ahead and dig into it. I've got 2 final things before we go into your dissertation on the tariff stuff that's to come. I've got 2 things. The first one is, Biden approves Ukraine to strike inside of Russia. This has been a slowly moving thing. A yardstick at first. If you would have asked anybody, is this going to happen? It would have been hell no, right out of the gate. And yet here we are. He approved it, and guess what? This came out, I think, a few hours ago. In a first, Ukraine hits Russia with long-range American missiles after Biden's approval. The strike targeted a Russian military facility near the city of Karachev in the Bryansk region, located approximately 130 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Russia on Tuesday confirmed that Ukraine used the long-range missiles against its territory and said it marked a new phase of the Western war against Moscow and vowed to react accordingly. Quote, "This, of course, is a signal that they want to escalate," Russian Foreign Minister Sergei blah, 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 Lavrov said, speaking at the G20 press conference in Brazil. Lavrov also urged the West to read a decree signed by Russian President Vladimir Putin on the same day that these strikes happened that lowers the threshold for when Moscow can use nuclear weapons. Quote, "I hope they will read this doctrine in its entirety," emphasis added by Lavrov himself. Yeah. So what I almost said the F word. What the hell is creepy Joe Biden doing to us, man? Why would he do this on the way? I think you're a lame duck president. Go sleep on the beach somewhere.
We talked about this in the green room before the show. My question is, how long before Hunter gets a board position on Lockheed Martin Marietta? Fill in the blank, right? That's my cynical side. Why? I don't know. I mean, what's the point of this, right? And to Tony's point, why does Ukraine need Creepy Joe's approval? My guess is that if they do it without his approval, or without some sort of U.S. approval, then there's a threat of cutting off future weapons.
Yeah, Daddy pulls the HIMARS out. You don't use them like we tell you to use them.
Yeah. And Tony's previous comment asking about, another Gulf of Tonkin incident. Anything's possible. Yeah. At this point, I am so cynical. I rule nothing out. So, hold on. Best comment. Okay, show's over.
It's all Donald Trump's fault.
Yeah.
And that's what they're setting up, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They're leaving him a freaking mess.
They are. And, we're going to dig into some of those things with the economic side, too. They're setting him up for a fall here.
Yeah. So that's the first big mess Trump's going to have to deal with. And here's the thing, man. Putin has been clear with these red lines. It goes, and you can take it all the way back to when James Baker told Mikhail Gorbachev, not 1 inch further. You have my word on it when he was Secretary of State, not 1 inch further. NATO will not push further. And then they push further.
Yep. Again and again.
Again and again. 7, 8, 9 countries later, here we are. And they're like, I mean, imagine, and again, we have a hard time here in the U.S. turning the map around and looking at it from our perspective. My God, they put missiles in Cuba. We're ready to annihilate the world for it. And yet we encroach on them, and it's like, hey, get over it.
Well, and we almost annihilated the world over the Cuban Missile Crisis, but Cuba is still suffering the consequences of that.
Yeah.
The grid is shot. I mean, as a car guy, there's a lot of classic cars down there, but it's not by choice. It's because they can't get anything else, right?
That's right.
So imagine how we would feel if suddenly the very socialist leftist government that's currently in charge of Mexico got a little buddy with China, and there's Chinese military installations across the Rio Grande.
I tell you, man.
Yeah.
I know. And my brother Jeff said he was reading me an actual headline this morning. He said, well, not this morning, this afternoon. He says all of the news agencies are saying, what is Trump going to do now with Russia and Ukraine? It's like, yeah, exactly. Escalate the hell out of it. And then it thwarts a lot of the things that he could have, should have done.
Yep.
Come January the 20th.
My hope is that, Putin had to reiterate the nuclear threat because of this. My hope is Putin will play the long game and you go, how many days till Trump's in there? And,
he's a rational actor, right? So he's, people want to paint the guy as a madman. He's not, or we'd already be blown out of hell.
Valid point.
But if you look at the change in the doctrine, for those that aren't in the know, the change in the doctrine essentially said, if someone attacks us, a non-nuclear armed state attacks us with the help of a nuclear armed state, it will be viewed as a nuclear threat, or words to that effect, which is a valid, rational point. And here we are walking our way toward Armageddon. Now let's get to the final one before we get to your tariff stuff, because I'm really interested in this. I'm a fan of tariffs myself, if they're done correctly. So I'm interested to see what you have to say. So here's my second big, and not necessarily a geopolitical threat, but definitely an American threat. And again, I got to credit my brother for showing me the danger of this pick. Okay. So so Trump is coming in. He's picking his cabinet. Mitch McConnell could have just wrote it out and then let Trump come in and put forward, Scott, who he really wanted, not this guy. And yet, what the Republican Senate did? They had a secret meeting. Keep it quiet. We're going to have a secret meeting. Yeah. And we're going to tell Donald Trump's pick, Rick Scott, to piss off, and we're going to elect this guy. And at first, it's like, okay, who is he? I don't know this guy. Thun, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Republican in South Dakota. Thune. All right. Well, he's trying to play some kind of cheeky pie game, and I'm gonna dig into his comment here that bristles me. Did you say Thune?
Thune, yes.
Thune, yeah.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, Thune told Fox News chief political anchor Brett Baier Thursday on special report that Senate Republicans are going to work with Trump to, quote, see that he gets his team installed as quickly as possible so he can implement his agenda. And I read that and I go, yes, because I voted for disruption. Okay. Yes. I voted for a paradigm shakeup. That's exactly what I want. I hired a mercenary to do it. I worked for a boss one time when he was the executive officer at 8th and I Marine Barracks in Washington, D.C., just down from the White House. The commander of the barracks said, hey, man, we got a problem with rats. I want you to do something about it. Captain Martin was his name then. He retired as a colonel. I want you to do something about it. He's like, this is the priority, sir? He's like, yeah, this is the priority. Fix the rat problem. He says, roger that. So he stopped all the drilling for like the silent drill team and all the ones that are out there marching all over Washington, D.C. is like, we're going to hunt and kill every damn rat on this place. And then when the commander came in the next morning, he cut all the heads off the dead rats and had them on little toothpicks lining the way where the colonel walked in the morning. And he's like, oh, this captain's nuts. He's like, hey, sir, you are a mercenary. You're going to get some heads on sticks.
That's it.
It was a ballsy move. But my point is, like, I vote for that guy.
Yeah.
So let's go to his second comment. So I hear the first one. I'm thinking, all right, maybe Thune is our guy. He says, quote, all these people have a process that they have to go through. Now he's talking about the cabinet picks. Trump's pushing for a recess appointment so he can get them installed, and we'll figure it out later and let them start disrupting. But he says all these people have a process that they have to go through. All these nominees it's advice and consent. That's a Senate's constitutional role when it comes to confirmation of nominations to the executive branch of the government, and we take that role seriously, he said, end quote. Then he said, quote, but we're also not going to allow the Democrats to obstruct or block President Trump and the will of the American people. I'm like, brother, you're blocking it.
Yeah.
You could say, we got the mandate, President Trump or President-elect Trump. We're going to recess appointment these guys for you. Not a problem. Let's get them in and let's get them start. We'll have wrecking balls here ready, and we're going to start tearing down a lot of this shit. Instead, he's like, no. Got an appointment process to go through. It's like that. I don't think you heard the mandate, man. So I'm so disappointed in this, and I hope it's much ado about nothing. Do you have any thoughts on this at all?
It sounds like he's part of the machine. Now,
Yep.
I will say that I'm not. There's a time and a place for recess appointments, just like there's a time and a place for executive orders. My only concern is, do recess appointments just become the norm, like executive orders have become the norm?
Here's a pushback I'll give on that.
Okay.
Forever, the president got the cabinet he wanted. Nobody really gave a shit, like, okay, he wants this person for Secretary of Energy, Secretary of Defense. It's like, okay, man, we got it. It's kind of a rubber stamp process. It is getting more of a fight. And to me, that's just the machine, to use your words, the swamp, to use a more pejorative word, that is fighting. And, this is the Mitch McConnell pick, right, to be his successor. He doesn't want Scott, because Scott's going to be like, yeah, no problem. Senate stays in recess. Get them in there. Let's get them in their desk. Let's get them making decisions. Instead, it's like, whoa, pump the brakes, bro.
Yeah.
And right now, he's got, as we've said before on the show, he's got about 18 months.
Yeah.
He's got about 18 months to get the agenda done. They can drag out these appointments for, I don't know, maybe a year.
Yeah.
And drag their damn feet.
Yeah, that's a valid point. It really is. And there is you're absolutely correct. There's the historical perspective of it. Used to just be like, is this person qualified? Not do I agree with them? Are they qualified? And we can even take that into Supreme Court nominees, right? So, and I mean, the Democrats have already come out and said they're against the next nominee, no matter who it is, because of something they did in high school, right?
Well, we saw that with the Kavanaugh thing, right?
Right, absolutely. And that's, and obviously if someone has committed a heinous crime, hold them accountable for that. However,
it's the allegation, though, of a heinous crime, and that's what they're going to do with Matt Gaetz. Exactly
right. And so it's, guilty until proven innocent, and let's spin it in the political machine. And that's the real problem. It goes back, which president had the kitchen cabinet way back in the day? Way back. Wasn't Lincoln? Was it FDR?
Was it somebody help us out here? Was it Grant?
Yeah. I really don't remember, but they had the kitchen cabinet because at the time, I think the cabinet, wasn't there one point in time the cabinet was actually appointed by the Senate or something? It was a weird situation back then. I can't remember. That's way back in the brain cells as well. But so the overall situation isn't completely unprecedented, but it is unprecedented in the sense that it now has to be somebody the other side approves of versus just, yes, that person's qualified.
Yeah, and I think the picks are qualified.
Yeah, I agree.
We talked about that because that's some of the things the left is saying. Well, they're not qualified. I'm like, what are you talking about? We're done with the Leon Panettas. And again, this clown wasn't qualified until somebody started appointing him to these positions.
Right.
But enough about that. He's one to watch, I guess, is my big point there, Will.
Yeah. Well, and define qualified.
Exactly.
When
what objective measure are you using?
Yeah, and when the director of the Secret Service fails as badly as that happened, how was that person qualified, right? So I'm sick and tired of what Washington, D.C. says is qualified. Qualified is you got the right connections versus having some real world experience. And I'll go back and use the Kathy Woods example for the SEC. She's worked within the system. She understands how the system works. She understands the pitfalls of the system. And I'm sure she's found ways to work the system, right? She runs billions of dollars every day. So same thing, Elon Musk has proven he can make things efficient. So is Vivek Ramaswamy, right? These people are qualified. They've done it.
Yes.
With their own money on the line.
And I've mentioned on Monday's show, I'm about halfway through Walter Isaacson's amazing book on Elon Musk. I highly recommend it. You will have a whole new love affair with this guy that gets shit done on time, under budget. It's just a phenomenal person.
Yep. All right. So you brought up China earlier. So let's dig into tariffs because, well, it's not just China. That's basically what's been talked about. So I'm going to talk about it as though it's only China, but understand it could be anybody. So let's first cover the basics of tariffs here, okay? They're typically inflationary. There's no two ways about it. They raise prices. Now, is inflation good, bad? We're going to dig into that a little bit, okay? So Trump put tariffs in, as I'm going to call it here, Trump 1.0. He put tariffs in on Chinese products, but those were not inflationary. Prices did not go up considerably because of those. They went up a little bit, but not nearly as much as the tariff was. Okay?
Can we pause? Can we pause real quick?
Absolutely.
Explain what a tariff is and what's the purpose of it in this
situation. Thank you. I skipped ahead. So a tariff, let's say you got country Brown and country Will. Okay. And I'm going to impose a tariff on imports from country Brown into my country. So that immediately adds, it's usually talked about as a percentage, 25% to whatever imports come in from your country to mine. So if it costs $100, now it's going to cost $125. That 25 extra percent or dollars in this case goes into the national coffers.
But why would we institute tariffs? I mean, why not just let free trade to just flow?
Well, a few reasons for this. The most recent reason to do this is cheap Chinese labor.
Currency manipulation. You got to manipulate your currency. How can I fight with you? Yeah.
The Chinese have not and are not allowing their currency to float. It's fixed. They peg it as a multiple of the dollar, and they will play with that to give themselves trade advantages. So we can counter that by adding costs to their product, right?
That's a great explanation. And I think that the tariff thing too is like to level the playing field. Like you won't let Chevys and Fords and our American vehicles in, but we're expected to just take an unlimited amount of yours. Yep. I mean, I'm just using that automotive as an example.
And in the case of those automotive companies you talked about, they do allow those into China with very steep tariffs. They do. So I view tariffs much the same way I view immigration laws. In that, you want to do that to us? Yeah, fine. I'm just going to cross out your name on this document and change it out to my name, and there you go, right back at you.
Love it. That's a great way of saying it.
That would level things up pretty darn quick. So,
Tony's question says, "Is tariffs funded the government? Will our taxes be reduced as tariffs go into place?" Because prior to 1913, that's how the United States funded the government, was through tariffs. And then once Congress got permission through, I think it was the 16th Amendment, to levy whatever tax they wanted on the American people, tariffs was like,
You guys are funny. Taxes going down? You guys are so funny. You should go on the road with that. That's a winner right there. Let me talk about Joe Rogan, Bill Barr, Rich, Tony. You guys will be right up there with them. In a perfect world, yes, of course. However, we've got this world. So,
we got to pay down the damn debt too. It's not going to get down. It's not going to get done with just tariffs. It's going to have to be both, right?
And I will argue, as I think we've mentioned in past shows going way back, the debt's never going to get paid off. It's never going to. It can't be done. I shouldn't say it can't be done. There's one way it can happen, and that's in inflation. That's the only way we get rid of the debt. Is inflation,
ray of sunshine today,
or a soft default. One of the
Mucho sunshine from Mr. Willwood.
Yeah, man, and there's more coming too here. So get your umbrella ready. So the Trump 1.0 tariffs weren't really inflationary. They were slightly, but the tariffs varied from 7.5% to 25%, depending on the products, but prices didn't go up by that much. And the reason for that was the Chinese government absorbed much of it. And they instructed the companies to absorb it. It's all one and the same over there, right? So they did that because they needed to keep the factories running. They needed to keep the money flowing, right? It was just the cost of doing business at that point. Different times in China right now. China's printing money like crazy, trying to keep their economy afloat, right? And so it's back then money was flowing great. I mean, remember, we're talking 2016 to 2020, basically pre-COVID. Okay. Economy's humming along. We're sending money over there as consumers like crazy. They could absorb 7%. No big deal. Even 20%, right? Different times this time. So we need to be careful as we observe these things that we're not dealing with the same situation out there. Okay. Big youth unemployment problem in China. They've stopped reporting those numbers, and they are printing money like crazy. They still have their Evergrande problem, their property problem over there. None of those have gone away.
You and I thought that thing was just going to blow China to pieces. It turns out it was like a burp.
Well, it's still hurting them.
Yeah.
But it did not blow them to pieces the way we thought it would, for sure. And, it goes back to, as I've told my wife, I've correctly predicted 11 of the last 2 recessions. So I am too pessimistic, and things never play out as fast as I think they will. Although I think I'm improving on that.
Yeah, we're both guilty of that.
I think so, sir. I think so. So will they be inflationary this time? I think they will be. But it depends on exactly how bad that inflation will be and how quick it will hit. Depends on exactly how they're structured. Okay. So if we go in and say 100% tariff on something, overnight price doubles. Well, that's going to be inflationary, right? Because they can't absorb 100% tariff, because then they're making it for free, right?
Let's talk about that. That's such a great point. And before we go any further, and I'll try to shut up during most of this lecture, but I think that, to your point about the structuring of the tariff, is the most central point of the whole thing, because if not, we're going to hurt one industry more than another, one region of the country more than another. We saw with the show you and I did about the causes of the Civil War that the nullification crisis of 1820 was the first time that a state went, I'm leaving the freaking Union over a 50% tariff on British-made goods, who was, of course, our dominant trading partner at the time. So if this is not managed correctly, it could lead to a lot of problems here in the U.S., not just global.
Yep, absolutely. So here's my question. Is inflation always bad? And the answer is no, it's not. What markets really need is predictability. Okay. The Fed's target of 2% inflation, they just made it up. Okay. You don't want inflation to be too high. It's kind of like the porridge, right? Not too hot, not too cold. 2% is a nice number. The more important, though, can our economy run forever on 7% inflation? It can, yeah. I'll argue it can. Because as long as it's stable and predictable. If I know prices are going to go up 7% a year and my wages are going up 7% a year, my purchasing power remains the same year to year, right? But if you think about when inflation spiked to 9, it was the hockey stick of it, right? And it was the unpredictability of it. That's what really hurts. Okay. Now,
the thing is, we always think that humans are going to react like an Excel spreadsheet, and 7% after 7% after 7% is going to take a toll. It is, yes, on people's mental state, and I think that's why that 2% tariff target for inflation. I think it saw where it boils down to a doubling of prices every 23 years. Don't quote me on that, but it's something like that. And I think that people can wrap their head around that because it's a generational thing.
Yeah. Well, but it's also what we're used to. And it's actually 36 years, brother. It's a rule of 72. Take your inflation or your investment return rate, divide that into 72, and that's the number of years to double, whatever it is.
Okay.
So
there you go.
That knowledge and about $4 will buy you a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
Maybe 5.
Maybe 5. I'm not a coffee drinker, as you know, so I wouldn't know. And Tony brings me a point. When have wages ever matched inflation? And the answer to your question is a very simple one. It's one word: never.
That's right. Never.
Okay. But and this is where one of the dangers of inflation is your K-shaped recovery. Asset owners, we love inflation, right? Value of your home's gone up, value of my home's gone up, value of whatever else has gone up, right? So I can withstand if my pay doesn't quite keep up with inflation because the value of my assets are going up. That's
what about a non-asset owner like a lot of Americans?
And that's the danger, right? That's where we get into, this dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots, and that's dangerous. That's how you end up with the French Revolution, right?
Amen.
So, and this comes back to what you were talking about with tariffs and debt. I will argue that's the only way, other than a default of some sort. It's the only way the national debt gets paid off is inflation. That's it. It's the only way. That's the only way it's going to happen, because they've got to dilute the money to the point that $36 trillion in debt isn't $36 trillion anymore.
Damn, that's depressing.
It is. But that's the only way. You can't, if you pull $36 trillion out of the world economy and pay off our debt, the entire economic system collapses.
So that means that in my lifetime I could be a billionaire.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're already a trillionaire, right?
Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
Those signs from the people starving in Zimbabwe, man, they're holding a sign that says, I'm a starving billionaire.
Yeah.
And that's the point, inflation, to fix the problem, it can lead to something like that. And it can definitely run away from the Fed, no matter what they tell you they can do.
Absolutely. And that's the problem with all that stuff, right? And they can be late. Inflation is transitory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even when they started raising interest rates, they were still doing quantitative easing. They were still printing money. They were fighting. Their two systems were fighting each other.
Yes.
Right. So that's the problem, because if you make any of those changes too fast and shock the economy, now you got a whole nother set of issues. Right?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. And it may be in one of the future slides. I try not to look into your slides so that I can be just as shocked by them as everybody. But, how is the market going to respond to these? Are we going to talk about that?
I was saving that for the next show.
Okay.
This is interest of time of tonight and all that. So this is kind of tying in with your China geopolitics stuff. So, employment. Now, if we just talk about inflation, just talking about that right now, inflation is typically good for employment. There's just more money rolling around in the system, right? Ask the John Deere workers how they feel about deflation. Ouch. Tractor prices started going down. They started laying off a lot of people. And then their suppliers who supplied those same plants are laying off people, right? And go look at the automakers right now. They're having a hard time moving vehicles. They're dropping prices. Ask them how they feel about lower prices, right? So we're going to dig into this, and I got a spreadsheet here later on. We're going to talk about how a made-up version, maybe how this could work out. And we'll never be as clean as this spreadsheet. We know that, because as you point out, people don't act like spreadsheets, but
that's right.
It gives us a model to start with. Okay. And then what about our prices, right? Our prices on things. That's obviously an inflation versus deflation thing. Will tariffs drive prices up? Yes.
But see, that speak to the Trump is talking about bringing prices down. Then he talks about instituting tariffs. And I don't think people understand, that it ain't going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, if tariffs come in, we're just spitballing here. If you put 100% tariff on something starting the day after inauguration, prices are going up. Period. Dot. End. It can't not go up, right? But I'm going to put a proposal in here in a few slides where we're going to talk about how the economy may be able to adjust for tariffs under a certain set of circumstances. Because you remember, going back to our inflation thing, it's the predictability, especially when it comes to markets. Markets love predictability. They hate uncertainty. And there's a way to do tariffs where it's predictable.
Okay.
And it's been done before. This is not untested. Okay.
Do you remember what administration did it? Reagan. Okay.
So,
and you're going to get to that with the motorcycles, right?
Yep, absolutely. But what if we also look at this inflation through a very long lens here? Okay. December 11th, 2001. That's when China officially joined the WTO. We have been seeing nothing but deflation, really deep price deflation since then, right? Because manufacturing went over to China, right? And our prices came down, right? Mm-hmm. So now, if prices start going back up, if we looked at this on a long enough timeline, would that last 23 years just be kind of a valley, like when you look at a stock chart? And now we're coming back up to the longer term trend line. I didn't run the numbers on it, but it's just something to think about. This globalization, deglobalization thing, it all dovetails together. Globalization was doomed to eventually fail because, as you put it, humans are involved and greed and power are going to take over. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last one is, do tariffs have to be zero or all in? Does it have to be 100% tariff or no tariff? You're absolutely right. It does not. Okay.
Yeah. And Tony said, tariffs won't affect products made in the U.S. His point is to bring manufacturing back. And I think that's exactly right. In the Marine Corps, we call it the in order to statement. What is the commander's intent? It is in order to bring manufacturing back and make it profitable again to make products here and make it, make it. I don't know. I think the intent is good. We'll see how the execution goes.
Yep, absolutely. So I got this off the Council of Foreign Relations, website. Don't use where I used a double VPN and somebody else's computer to go on there. Okay. So you'll notice the date on this is a few years old. Okay. So this is an article they did on globalization, basically, with China when China joined the WTO. What would happen to the U.S. economy? The hope was the U.S. economy would economically profit because we get cheaper goods, right? Well, the realities, according to them, were mixed. Consumers paid cheaper prices for the imported Chinese goods, right? That we know that happened. That's good, right? And corporations profited because they were using cheaper labor. So as you can see, the dollars flowed into China. That was our excess dollars, whether it's coming from corporations through the sales of things, and then they invest there, or consumers buying directly from China, which is more common now with the internet, right?
Yeah.
And here's the one where the rubber meets the road. Industries like manufacturing experienced job losses because of Chinese competition. One article, I don't think I put it in here. The average American worker in the example they were giving was making like $36 an hour when you were all in with, unemployment insurance, Social Security, all that stuff at that time period. Okay. And the Chinese workers at the time were like $1.36 an hour.
Damn.
I'll tell you what, as a business owner, I know where I'm making my stuff.
I'm going to China.
Yeah. You can't not. You won't compete. You'll be out of business. There's a big word for it. It's called bankruptcy. And we can fault businesses for it, but every single one of us has benefited from it as well.
Yes,
but it's been a lot of pain, right? Yeah. So we
that was a hard one for me to grasp until you pointed it out. I'll be honest with you. I was pretty cynical to like, yeah, you profited from it, Rich. I'm like, me, America's son? I did?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
How's your Roth doing? How's your 401k doing?
Yep.
Okay. Good
and if you got two companies side by side to invest in, and one's making a 30% profit margin and one's making a 2% profit margin, I don't know which stock I'm buying.
Can we talk about that? When I first retired from the Marine Corps, I may have mentioned this years and years ago, but it's interesting to bring back because your point is great. I remember there was two hammers on the wall. I was a store manager of a $52 million Lowe's, and we had two hammers on the wall. And I remember like, wow, they're both equally beautiful. And one of them says it's made in California. That's its value proposition to the consumer, right? Made in California. I think we sell that hammer for $19.95. Well, I can scan it and see what the Lowe's cost is. So that $19.95 hammer, beautiful as it was, cost Lowe's $16.95 to buy it.
Okay.
So we got a profit margin of $2.50. Then the next gorgeous hammer next to it is made in China. It's got American hickory handle. It's forged. It's everything about it is just as good, if not better. The other one, we sell it for, let's say, $16.95. We buy it for $2. You see what I'm saying? It's exactly what you're saying. I got $14 profit margin in one, and I got $2 profit margin in the other. Which one do you think I want to
You can
sell?
run a 50% off sale to drive sales on a Saturday and make more money per hammer on that one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So which one do you think I want to? What do you want to do?
Yeah, and it's. I mean, calculators don't lie, right?
Never had one lie to me yet.
That's it. So, and we can all look back on this chart now from the CFR and go, yeah, that's exactly what happened. And again, who benefited from this? Asset owners.
Yeah.
Right. So there's something for all of us to keep in mind, no matter whether you're on the asset, whether you have a lot of assets or little or no assets, because this plays into much of your life. It's just all there is to it. So, all right. So let's get into the 1983 motorcycle tariff. Okay.
So this is a specific example, right, of what we were talking about now.
Absolutely. So this is a 1983 motorcycle tariff or memorandum on heavyweight motorcycle imports. Was a presidential memorandum ordering a 45% tariff on heavyweight motorcycles imported to the United States, signed by President Ronald Reagan, April 1, 1983, on the U.S. International Trade Commission's recommendation to approve Harley-Davidson's petition for import relief. The tariff expired in 1988. Okay, so let's dig into the background a little bit here. Okay, bear with me while I read through this. Harley was the sole surviving American motorcycle manufacturer. All of the company's models in production were heavyweight motorcycles. Before the imposition of the tariff, Harley was facing a sharp sales decline, mainly due to the competition of Japanese motorcycle companies. Less than a decade before, Harley-Davidson had a 100% market share of 1,000cc or larger motorcycles within the U.S. Just a decade later, its market share had fallen to less than 15%. Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, and Kawasaki undercut Harley-Davidson by $1,500 to $2,000 per vehicle. In 1980, Harley did $289 million in sales, and then slumped to $200 million in just 2 years. It's almost a 33% decline in sales in 2 years. Employees also saw a harsh decline in wages and hours worked. The unsold inventory of bikes doubled during the time period, again, due to the undercutting of Japanese counterparts. So there's your setup. There's your problem, right? So, and there was huge problems back then. Harley, big quality control problems, all sorts of
Pieces of shit. Let's be honest.
Oh, they were total.
They had 100% market share. So what do people do? They're lazy. I got 100%.
Exactly. Right. So, but look what happened in just 2 years. And I can remember in the 80s, I mean, if you wanted a bike that would start, don't buy a Harley.
No.
And it's the old joke, right? How do you know when a Harley's out of oil? It's not leaking oil.
It stopped leaking, yeah.
Okay. That's when you knew you had to fill it for sure. Okay. So there's our background. 45% tariff, 1983. Okay. All right. So now here's where we get into it. The format of the tariff. Okay. During the first year of the tariff, it was 45%. Bang. 45%. Dropped to 35% in the second year. Third year dropped to 20, 15% in the fourth, 10% in the fifth. Okay. The total tariffs on foreign motorcycles were actually these other numbers, because down here later we get into there was an additional foreign bike tariff that was in here as well. I won't bore you with all the details. In order to avoid harming small-scale manufacturers other than the big Japanese bike companies, tariff rate quotas were implemented. Okay. These quotas exempted manufacturers from additional tariffs implemented by the bill, but still require them to pay the 4.5% rate on all motorcycles as part of a tariff that still exists today. Okay. Right. Now, here's where, and this is where you can get into the surgical part of tariffs. 5,000 units increased yearly to 6,000, 7,000, 8,500, and 10,000 motorcycles were tariff exempt for motorcycles manufactured in the Federal Republic of Germany. That basically excluded BMW bikes. So it's a little throw out there for the Germans, right? Because they're our ally, right? We want to go after the Japanese bikes. We don't want to hurt the Germans, right? So 6,000 units, increasing 1,000 per year, were exempt for motorcycles imported from Japan. So they could get a few exempt, okay? Let's see here. This tariff did not apply to any bikes manufactured within the country, which made 90,000 Honda and Kawasaki bikes manufactured within the U.S. exempt. So this is where we get, they pull the manufacturing, they incentivize the Japanese bike companies to at least build them here, employ U.S. citizens, right? But let's think about, they needed a shock. Harley was on the edge of going out of business. They needed inflation. They needed higher prices. They needed money, right?
If our intent is to support American manufacturing, yes.
Yes. Because without higher prices, Harley can't rebuild, right? They can't get those sales back up. They can't get those people back to work. They can't keep their plants open. So this was good inflation for Harley-Davidson, right? So this is where we have to be careful of always saying inflation is bad. This was good inflation for Harley Davidson, their stockholders, their workers, their supply chain, right? And then it scaled down. So it gave Harley some breathing room, but then also gave him a timeline. It gave him that predictability. You know what's coming next year and the year after and the year after, right? So that's where we're talking about markets like that predictability. People knew what to expect. They could plan for it, and it gave them some breathing room. And it incentivized the Japanese bike companies to bring some production over here.
Yeah.
So this is where tariffs can get quite surgical.
I love it. It's different than the way I would have thought of doing it. You know, starting at a target of 45, and then titrating down.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I would have thought start low and titrate up, but I think the way they did it makes more sense when I think about it.
In this case, it makes a lot of sense because you're trying to save a company. That's really what they were doing. They're trying to save.
Don't you think it's just another form of bankruptcy? You're giving them a little breathing room, let them restructure, let them retool.
Exactly. It's exactly what it was. Now, I will argue, I don't think this is how tariffs today should start getting structured.
No.
Okay. No. Because here they were trying, it was a bailout.
Yes.
And it was a bailout on the back of motorcycle buyers.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So call it what it is. Okay. And everybody was in favor of it. And if we go to the next slide.
Okay.
And then the tide turns. Come 2023, Harley's complaining about tariffs in the EU.
Interesting.
Because Harley was tearing BMW up in Germany and everybody else. So I won't read all this to you and bore you with it again. But then all of a sudden, give it 40 years, and suddenly Harley's like, tariffs, those are bad.
Oh no, we can't do that.
Right. So this is, long story short, I put this in mainly just to show that everybody's going to look out for their own interests, which we know. And this is just business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then they're complaining about how this, stops free trade, but they weren't worried about that in '83 when they were getting ready to go out of business. Then free trade was bad.
But I was thinking as you were saying that, I'm like, yeah, but we're supporting American business. But in the age of, again, globalization, where this idea that this is an American company, really, is it? Why? Because you have a small staff here, but everything else is offshore. The supply chain is offshore. The manufacturing is offshore. The only thing that's done is you got a headquarters here and you sell products here. Yeah. Then it's not really an American company because it's providing zero or less than almost zero American jobs. And the intent is to get our manufacturing back. And my friend Michael Gentili, I saw him on earlier. I'm not sure if he's still here. This is something I've been telling him for, since I met him 20, 30 years ago. I'm like, we don't make anything here anymore. Mm-hmm. Doesn't anybody see this as a problem? And for a long time, it's like, hey man, shut up. We're all making money.
Yeah, exactly. We're making money, and it's, money's always going to flow to the highest yield. The highest yield was making your stuff in China.
Yes, that's right.
Period.
And again, for if you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders, and I can make it over there for $1 an hour instead of $30 an hour, I owe it to them to go over there. But if you look at it like, I'm an American company, what's the best for my country? But that's not the way they think, and I get it.
No. Yeah, and also, it's not just the labor rate either. What about the regulation? What about the red tape?
Oh my God! Yes.
What about? I mean, how many factories in China are worried about DEI? Or what was the global credit score, ESG, right?
Yeah.
So if you get to shed all that, even if the labor costs were the same, but you get to shed all this regulation and jumping through all these hoops, there's an advantage there too. So
there's a huge advantage.
Yeah. So, all right. So just to show that tariffs have been bipartisan, this is from CNN. President Obama slapped a 35% tariff on Chinese tires in 2009 after American companies complained about unfair competition. China was flooding the American market with tires at low prices, making it tough for U.S. companies to compete. The tariff gradually waned and finally ended in 2012. And I do want to jump back to the Harley thing real quick. They actually ended that tariff, I believe it was 1 year early, perhaps 2, at Harley's request. Because they got their fecal matter gathered and started running a good business, and things worked out. So I didn't want to throw that in there for Harley. It says the tariff here on the tires saved 1,200 jobs. And here's the part: Americans paid more for tires. Some Chinese tires, Chinese-made tires, cost as much as 26% more than before the tariff, rising on average to $39 per tire. If only we could get tires for that now, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I remember when this thing was going on. I was in the Marine Corps, and I'm, pretty senior guy. And when Obama did this, right? That's what she
Yes.
Said.
Yep.
Yeah, and this guy I knew who was stamping out tires in a factory was making. It was crushing what I was making. I'm like, dude, I've been in the Marine Corps for 15 freaking years. You've been stamping out tires for 6 months, and you're making more money than I am. How is that freaking possible?
Yep.
But that's the advantage of this kind of thing.
Yep. And then the last little bit here, in 2008, there were 60,000 American workers making tires. At the time of this writing, there were 55,000, which, while lower, was much higher than it was at the trough. And if we go to the next slide, we can see the date of this article. Okay. This was a look back in January of 2017, looking back at the at that tariff. So now there again, they were trying to save a section of American manufacturing, right? So I think that's why they came in with a 35% tariff. Harley was 45 right away, and it came down, right? Well, now we're in a different situation. We're not necessarily targeting one thing, or maybe they will in specific areas, maybe like steel, right? Because I think it's a Japanese company came in and just had a big bid for U.S. steel. I'm not sure what the status of that is. So if anybody knows, throw it up there. So I just made up a tariff schedule here just to show how it could maybe work out. So this is January 1st of 25, 2026, 27, 28, and finally 2029. So we're selling widgets here, brother. Okay. Okay. So we'll work the left of the red first. Okay. So U.S. made widget retail price, what you're going to pay for it. Okay. In 2025, you're going to pay $100 for that widget. Cost to make it in the U.S. is 80. U.S. made profits $20. Pretty straightforward math, right? And it stays at, if we go down, we see the price stays the same in 26, and then goes to 110, 120, 130, and our costs slowly ease up, right? Well, is that competitive or not? Well, let's look at the other side here. So if we take the China made widget retail price, well, right now in 2025, or coming soon in 2025, their retail price is $10 less. It's $90. Okay. Their cost to make it is 60. And I'll say that includes shipping, includes everything. And with a tariff of 0, their total cost to make it is $60, and they make $30. So they're making 50% more profit with a lower price. Okay. Okay. Now let's see what versus tariffs coming in high and going down. Let's see what the tariffs here that I have listed, adding $10 per year to this and giving them a year's notice. Hey, January 1st, 2026, it's going to be a $10 tariff. Let's watch what happens. So they raise their price a little bit. They absorb some of it, right? So they raise their price to $95 and they absorb the other $5. So it still costs them $60 to make the actual widget. The tariff is 10. Their total overall cost is 70. And their profit actually goes down to $25 per widget. Okay. Now, bear in mind, $10 of that retail price is going to go back into the national coffers, right? Now, I will say, overall, if this money isn't earmarked to go towards something specific, though, even with Team Red in Congress, they're going to find a way to waste it. So that'll be one thing for us to watch is what are they going to do with the tariff money? One thing,
and that's why it's got and I'm so glad you said that, because that's where the combined assault comes in. That's where all the cabinet picks are important. The DOGE, was it the Department of Government Expense?
Efficiency.
Yeah. And all this, because if you don't, you're right, they'll just piss the money away.
So now we go to 2027. The U.S. made widget price goes up to 110. Their cost stays the same at 80. I'm just trying to keep it simple so it doesn't take an hour to get through this, guys. Okay. Our profit goes up to 30. China matches that price. Their cost is 60. The tariff is 20. So their overall cost is 80. Now their profit is 30. We're making the same money, right? But $20 of that widget and 18% of that is coming back to the national coffers, right? 2028 goes to 120 for ours for the retail price. Our cost goes up to 90. Now, the reason I did that is because eventually here you're going to start paying your workers more because our prices are going up, right?
Right.
And this is where the slow onset of this, heck, even labor unions can price this out. They can renegotiate contracts, or when the contracts come up, they know what to expect for the tariffs, so that part is set, right? So then people can plan for that and say, we know this is coming. And they can even, if they want to get creative, they can say, if the tariff goes away, then the pay rate goes to this. Depends how they want to do it. Okay. All right. So, and so now in 2028, U.S. made retail price goes to 120. Cost is 90 because we're paying our workers more, making $30. China is the same, 120, 70 to make it, 30 for the tariff. They're making less than us now. Okay. So now this is where things flip. Manufacturers can make more money if they bring it back here. Okay, now let's think about this. I designed it this way because this gives them 4 years to build out the infrastructure to bring that production back here where they can now make more money because of the tariffs.
Correct.
Because they got to have this lead time. You got to build the buildings. You got to get the electrical infrastructure. Maybe
you got to work around the red tape that we have in America.
Bingo. All that stuff. That takes time. So trying to come in with a really high tariff right in the beginning is just going to drive inflation through the roof and kill supply chains. It's going to have to be a multi-year strategy like this. Otherwise, inflation is going to go through the roof. We're not going to have the infrastructure here to do this. I mean, it was 4 years ago, when you and I started talking about TSMC and they started building a plant in Phoenix. It's finally going to open next year. It takes time to build this out. Also takes time to train the workers. I mean, all these things.
And that's a great point. We're not just talking about making sneakers here.
Yeah.
We're talking about building high technology products that, to your point about the TSMC, the semiconductors, this isn't something that gets done overnight. It may take 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. So these are going to have to be, this can't be executive order that can be undone. I think this needs to be a law that gets passed that requires another act of Congress to undo it, is in my opinion. Because if it can be undone, all the Chinese have to do is lobby enough politicians to undo it, or whoever the next president is after Trump, because he's already a lame duck president, right? All they have to do is just bide their time, fight it in court, fight in the WTO long enough to hold it off, right? And then we can look down here to 2029 in this simulation. A company can make twice as much profit making it here in the U.S. than they could in China. Now, make no mistake about it, guys. This means your prices will go up.
Yes.
They will go up. But let's think about like the 70s.
But your pay should go up relative to that, right?
Bingo. And this actually brings power back to labor. It swings it away from management. It's a pendulum. It swings back and forth. This will swing the pendulum towards labor. And let's face it, I'm an investor. I like companies that make a lot of money. I like all that stuff. But let's face it, a strong middle class makes it for a strong country. And I can remember the days growing up in Illinois and farm implement country when one guy could go to work at a factory, he could drive a nice car, the wife could drive a nice car, they could live in a decent home on one salary. And that helps America. So this is what it's going to take. But there's going to be pain between here and there because it's going to be a transition. And we also have to change how we think about these things. And we're going to have to put up with inflation.
Yeah. And that's when he run on, I'm going to bring prices down. I'm like, eventually.
Yeah, eventually they will. And then they may be able to. And if they can get through some red tape and get some efficiencies in there, I think Tony threw a comment up earlier about it. If you get rid of 90% of government employees, that'll reduce costs and reduce taxes. Absolutely, all this plays in together, right? But if this goes back to the first one where I was talking about, if you look at this through a long enough lens, were we on a trajectory like this with inflation and then China joined the WTO and it goes like this and comes back up to here and rejoin the same trend line? Is it something like that? I don't know. We have to see how this shakes out.
Right.
And then, of course, does Biden successfully start World War III between now and then?
I don't know. I love this quote, by the way. I read this to my wife.
Go for it.
The secret is there is no secret. Consistency over intensity, progress over perfection, fundamentals over fads, over and over again. Rinse and repeat, folks. It's as simple as that.
That's it. It's like I tell my kids, find what works and do it with monotonous regularity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Musk has one like that. It's maniacal something, but it's almost exact quote.
Okay. So yeah, guys, I'm not against the tariffs. But be prepared, because when this inflation hits, we're going to get into it. The next show, I'm going to headline with a lot of economics and stock market stuff. And if these tariffs come in, this inflation is going to happen. And we're going to talk about maybe where you might want to be and might not want to be with your investments. # not financial advice.
Amen.
Yeah. So good stuff to think about, though. Get prepared. And this is going to be a long, slow process. This is one where you and I, brother, are going to have to slow our roll and go, this is going to take years.
Which is difficult for me.
And me too. Because you can see it coming, right? Whether you're talking about demographics or fill in the blank, you can see it all coming.
It's like the tide's coming. Yeah, bro, relax. It's going to be in 18 hours, but it's like, it's coming.
Is it time yet? How about now? Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah. So I'm looking forward to that discussion, and you did a great job putting that geopolitics stuff together, brother, as always. And it's going to be a time of a lot of changes. So get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, fantastic show, Will. Whenever you're ready, brother. I know it's late where you are. You got to fly in the morning, I imagine. So take us out, sir.
Fight's coming. Be ready.